There's a code of silence that we don't dare speak. There's a wall between us and a river so deep. We keep pretending that there's nothing wrong. There's a code of silence and it can't go on.
Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt. This is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 30th of July 2013. I always get this off at the beginning of the show. I always talk about the website cuttingthroughthematrix.com because you'll find on it well over 1,000 audios for free download where I go through the system, this big system, this all-encompassing system that we're born into, and explain how it came to be, because it's something that didn't simply come along by itself. It was designed a long time ago by professional people and also with the help of the richest people on the planet that formed foundations, tax-exempt foundations, that are worth trillions and trillions of dollars each. And they fund armies and armies of non-governmental organizations and groups for radical change, upsetting and destroying all that was to bring in the new, you might say. And so I go into the founders of it and how they got together and give themselves very officious sounding names like the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations, which simply is the same organization actually, and they're worldwide today, but they started off in the city of London, and they were the top bankers for international lenders actually of their day, and they decided to bring in a planned society, a planned world economy, and with themselves naturally being at the top of the tree, because everything runs on their money, of course. And no one questions that. Everything runs on their money. All governments do it too. Prime ministers, presidents must go cap in hand every year to get more loans and so on for the government. And believe you me, if you're the guy giving out the cash, you're the boss. And that's how the world's been for an awful long time. But it's more so today because they came up with a plan where they would get big think tanks and run them through their foundations. Massive think tanks, in fact. Some of the most prestigious names that you know in think tanks all work for them and were set up by them. And they advise all governments today on the same road, same agenda, basically, on all aspects of society, to bring in a global society for themselves under the guise of free trade, which isn't really free trade at all when you look into what it really is. And they brought in the United Nations as one of their front groups too. And also they created the big settlement banks, a bank for international settlements. Again, a private organization, just as the foundations themselves are. And they brought in the IMF and the World Bank and many other institutions too. So all these private organizations all work for the same foundations, bringing in their system of a future for themselves and their children. And they already have it worked out how long the general populations of today will last and die off gradually as they become more westernized and sterile too, by the way. And plus they won't want children, most of them. And they even come out with the Department of Defense on the projections for the future for the next 50 to 60 years. So I've gone through this in the archive section at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. Help yourself to find out how it all works. And also to tell you that everything, all the future is planned as well. All the big events are always planned, including the bank crashes. They're timed to come on when it's supposed to happen, to bring you into austerity, and to also devalue the currency in order to get all ready for a new type of currency down the road. Who knows when that'll be? They do themselves, I'm sure, exactly when it will happen for a global economy again. Remember too that you bring me to you, because I don't bring on advertisers as guests. I could certainly and pester you all the way through with ads, or I could sell lots and lots of products, but I don't. All I do is put out the books and discs at cuttingthroughthematrix.com, because the information is more important than anything. So if you want to support me, you can certainly buy the books and discs at cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and you'll find out how to do it on the website. And from the US to Canada, don't forget you can still send personal checks to order, or international postal money orders from the US to Canada, or send cash even, or use PayPal. And across the world, Western Union, MoneyGram, and PayPal. And I always say that straight donations, because I really mean it, are awfully welcome as they go through this planned inflation, as it's called, as they print up money that's backed with nothing, basically. And your currencies, doesn't matter what country you're in today, all currencies are being devalued at the same time by, again, private institutions that no one elects, by the way. And that's the big kicker too in all of this. We don't get a chance to vote on anything that really matters. Democracy, if you ask them in Canada or elsewhere, the only right that you have in democracy is to vote someone in, either in local levels, even your councils and your national levels too. And once you vote them in, they can do what they want. That's all there is to it. So that's the only right that you have is to vote, basically. Now, the Soviets had the same system, and there was only one party system there, the Politburo. And so you get Politburo number 1, 2, 3, or 4. I guess it was whoever you liked the most by photoshops or shots or whatever that they gave you to peer at through newspapers. And it much is the same here, because presidents and prime ministers will never know what they're really like, because everything about them is done by the professionals. It's all photo opportunities and exclusive interviews that are all arranged ahead of time. What can be said, what's not to be said, what they'll embellish or even fabricate to make up a story about their personality, to sell that to the general public. Just like you do with film stars. It's the same bunch actually that work, same advertisers and PR agencies that actually work with them to put on give you a persona for them. So we never know what they're like. Actually, you get a better chance to know what they're like when they get out after politics and they're getting their big payoffs or whatever they push in politics, and they're given so many boards on directorships, and they don't even have to attend meetings, and they get thousands of shares, and they do awfully well, just like Tony Blair, a really good example of a psychopath, a self-interested psychopath who obviously was well picked in advance. However, you find by going through Quigley's books, Carl Quigley himself was the historian, the private historian for the Council on Foreign Relations, because they have their own version of history where all the blank bits are filled in. And he gives the goal, the outline and so on. He said eventually, when they're using the military and so on, he says eventually the money system really kicks in, the overall control of money by a private central bank across the whole planet. Well, that's the BIS, you see. And he actually mentions the BIS. And they will have total control over all the currencies of the world. And of course, too, money is to be used as a big stick for taxation and taxation and taxation. Everything that they can imagine they can be taxed will be taxed to bring you in to the new society, which is austerity. This term, austerity. I think even the Fed Reserve chairman said the same thing about austerity. But mind you, too, as you get poorer and poorer, they're going to give you lots of drugs from pharma, because they'll go and check you every month or so. They're already doing this in Scotland, even the children, and they'll check your psychological well-being, you see. So if you're living on the streets, as long as you feel good about it and yourself, and you're happy, like some crazy loon, then everything's okay. And they're putting lots of money into training all these people to go around and talk to people who are losing it all physically and eventually mentally, to make sure they get you back and feeling well about everything again. That's a substitute for gross domestic product, apparently. So, as I say, most folk haven't got a clue as they go through life that every major event, all the wars too, are planned long ahead of them being implemented. Often they're planned long before you're born. And they can take 20, 30 years or more to actually get it underway. In fact, they have lists of countries to take out. And I can remember back in the Vietnam days, Vietnamese War, the CIA admitted at the time, well, after this one's over, we've got about 20 more to take down. Countries, that is, to take down. They actually talked about it, the different lists that they had. So, we'll live through big changes, planned changes. It's all expressed in the news media. Remember, all the editors and owners of newspapers are all the big boys. They're members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Remember, the Council on Foreign Relations, which belongs to the Royal Institute of International Affairs, private organizations, they have an inner council and an outer council. Our party, you might say. That's where George Orwell got his idea of the inner party and outer party. It was from something that already existed. And only those in the inner party or council know the big plans. Those below run it like a military operation. They obey orders, regardless if they're put in as prime minister or president. They obey orders. It's all based on faith that they'll be well taken care of if they do their job. Back with more after this. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix, talking about the big system, and it truly is a big system and it knows exactly where it's going, and believe you me, there's going to be a lot of upsets around the world by the time it's all finished with its big plans. But that's how the world's always really been run, by those in power. And I think, according to Francis Bacon, and in his books and so on to the king, he advised the kings that the public should really never have an idea of what's really going on, basically. Never told the truth. And that's what the media does today. It gives us lots of things to go, ooh, and and that's terrible, and something should be done about that. These kind of stories. And the rest of it's trivia, of course. It doesn't matter at all, because it happens all the time, lots and lots of trivia. We've got lots of entertainment, mind you, as well, to keep us busy. And as things get worse and worse, of course, folk always look for more entertainment. It's an escapism, you see. And because many folk can't handle what's really going on in the world. But here's an article here, for instance, that at least some people in some countries still get up and talk. And they're always lambasted if they belong to profession. You find this in the medical profession, where Wakefield was being lambasted by the British Medical Association because they get massive funding from all the big pharma companies. And he talked about the MMR, or the polio shots too, but MMR mainly, that was behind a lot of autism, and he was almost crucified for doing so. But here's an article here too about a Google engineer who won an NSA award, National Security Agency award, and then says that the NSA should be abolished after he got it. So last week, Dr. Joseph Bonall learned that he won the NSA's first annual Science of Security SOS competition which aims to honour the best scientific papers about national security as a way to strengthen the NSA collaboration with researchers in academia. Honoured Bonall for his paper on the nature of passwords. And so how did Bonall respond to being honoured by the NSA? By expressing in an honest and bittersweet blog post, and I'll put the link up tonight at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. It says his revulsion at what the NSA had become. It says, on a personal note, I'd be remiss not to mention my conflicted feeling about winning the award, given what we know about the NSA's widespread collection of private communications and what remains unknown about oversight over the agency's operations. Like many in the community of cryptographers and security engineers, I'm sad that we haven't been better informed the public about the inherent dangers and questionable utility of mass surveillance. And like many American citizens, I'm ashamed we've let our politicians sneak the country down this path. In accepting the award, it says, I don't condone the NSA surveillance. Simply put, I don't think a free society is compatible with an organization like the NSA in its current form. So I'll put this article up tonight too. It goes on a bit more, and it's well worth reading, because some people involved or have connections with these agencies are simply not content themselves, because it's affecting them too and their families. But since everyone's been spied on. But you understand, we're living in a totalitarian system. I mean, the whole idea of terrorism, this vague term called terrorism, is deliberately obscure, so they can always expand it into anything at all they want it to mean. And of course they couldn't push through their massive agenda at this time, and this is a massive agenda, worldwide takeovers of countries to be standardized, and private banks put in, private central banks put in, and then the loans from the IMF, like all the rest of us that are now democratic, you see, and an eternal debt forever. So they're doing away with the last few countries, but there's other countries around the world too, they're still to do away with this and standardize too. And they must keep us all in check as they bring us into austerity, as they tax us for more and more of all the funding we need for the wars and for all the military-industrial complex, which is totally subsidized by the public, basically, for new weaponry, always new weaponry. And it's like the old Cold War farce, where they deliberately put out nonsense that the Russians had a better missile than the XYZ or whatever, and we need a new XYZ Mark II next month, and these things lasted literally 3 or 4 months before there was another one out. It was all bogus, folks, and they profited awfully well off creating these things which are never to be used. So we're living in a controlled society. Now, many authors in the past have written their books. I'm talking about authors who partook in global clubs, if you like Lord Bertrand Russell, who wrote about the coming society that they were going to bring in. And he confirmed many of the things that Carl Quigley talked about with the Council on Foreign Relations, where he said that, he says, we do. He says, this organization does exist, he says, this private, secretive organization. And he said, it's often mistaken for communism because it would seem that their goals are very, very similar, if not the same. Meaning with society. See, communism too was a totalitarian regime. And many people, long before we heard of communism, already believed that totalitarian regimes were the only way to run the world and so on properly, by all those in academia. And the social sciences were coming up and so on. And behaviorists were coming out like crazy. And they believed they could create a perfect society to be ruled very meekly, because they'll be meek at the bottom. And that's where we're going today. Obey is the name of the day. And that's where we are today. But as I say, the big boys themselves did write books about it. There's lots of information out there in their own books. Lots of bureaucrats too, who retired, have written their own memoirs. And you'll find little gems in that too about the coming society that they helped set up. But it also meant the complete destruction of all nationalist type societies. And it's to make internationalism the key. Not all, so there's always one exception, but you'll find that's what had to happen. And then after World War II, they said it was more vital that this happened because it would bring us peace. And without it, there'd be no peace and so on. So they also wanted to destroy the family unit, because for even before Bertrand Russell was talking about it, H.G. Wells was talking about it in his non-fiction books, and he was a propagandist for this organization, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, before it even was given that name. Before that, it was called the Milner Group, Lord Alfred Milner Group. And so he was a propagandist who said the same thing, that most folk should live in a planned society where their betters, those with more intelligence, plan their futures and watch them and so on, and make sure they behave, and train them by using psychology. We're there today. It's astronomical what's been going on, and the folk are accepting it, one law after another, as meek as can be. They're all terrified to say anything, do anything, and that's part of the reason you get all these, and especially since 9/11, you get all these homeland security type shows, dramas, to instill into you, this is what happened to you if you do the wrong thing. And the wrong thing can be standing up and just saying this is all wrong. So folk are getting terrified. You're all being trained through fiction all the time, and you don't know it at all. You have no idea this is what's happening. Now, whenever they come out with, I've always said this, war technology, the spin-offs come from all the technology. That's how you got the microwave oven. In World War II, Germany already was way ahead with microwave transmissions. And even thermal detectors they had for the field, for the snipers. They had these little things that were like small umbrellas, and they could detect body heat in fields and hills far away. So where do they go from there? You go up into drones now. Drones are all the rage with the military-industrial complex, which of course is all funded by the taxpayer when it boils down to it. And here's where it's gone in Britain, and this is to go on all over the world. It's very similar to what I've mentioned before about the movie. It's called Blue Thunder, about a high-tech helicopter. And I think the movie came out in the 1970s, how it could spy through your walls and all these kind of things. Well, it's in drones now, and here's what they're doing with their drones that we're going to keep you all safe. In England, they've done this in London, it's revealed up to 6,000 beds in sheds. This is how they approach articles like this to make you feel it's for the right cause. Set up by rogue landlords or found by spy planes' thermal image camera. They're thermal imaging all your houses, folks, to catch rogue landlords. Who's kidding who? Back with more on this after this break.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix, talking about Big Brother, of course, And it's inevitable it would go this way because anything that can be done will be done. The public have no input whatsoever. It's simply done, and that's it. And technology is going to be your chains. It already is your chains, and you simply don't know it yet. But and we always pay for our own chains too. We always do at the bottom. But as I say, they're going into using spy planes, etc., with thermal imaging techniques and so on. And in some places over Britain. They've done it in other places too. This one here is about the Slough Borough Council. It's called a spy plane equipped with a thermal imaging camera has found more than 6,000 outbuildings in one town. Could be beds in sheds converted by rogue landlords. And it says, Slough Borough Council is the first local authority in the country to pay for the specially adapted aircraft to fly over streets, picking up heat from sheds and garages. So it's your body heat, you see. And it spent £24,000 on flights to build up a precise 3D map of every building in Berkshire Town. The result means thousands could be living there without planning permission or contributing to council tax. This is what they're telling you now. Now you tie this in with the thermal loss from homes and environmentalism and sustainability and the big fines that's going to come down the road too, as they find out you've got a leaky window or something like that, folks. I'm not kidding about this. It's going to go all the way with it. There's no doubt about this at all. Because they want drones down the road too to do the same kind of thing. Daily, by the way. And it says that they're playing crisscross streets, picking up heat signals from outbuildings, which they could signify that they're being used as sheds with beds. Analysis of the images captured in a 2-hour night flight has now revealed a staggering 6,350 suspicious dwellings in the borough. Although many of the outbuildings are habitable, some are described as being unsafe with little or no heating or do not comply with building or fire safety regulations. I'm telling you, the so-called public councils now are just like your parliaments and your governments, your national governments. They look upon their power as a private business to rake in cash and penalise folk through tickets and so on, and massive fines. And it says landlords face £200 fines in the prospect of their so-called beds and sheds being demolished if caught illegally renting them out. They demolish your shed. Could you believe that, eh? Well, that's Britain. I mean, they actually have things, big vehicles in Britain. If they catch you without insurance and stuff, or you don't have your MOT, your Ministry of Transport certificate yearly for safety and so on, or sticker it on your car, they literally smash it on the road. A big machine comes along, like a crusher, and picks it up and crushes it all, and it's gone. That's it. That's your trial over. There's no jury there. And it says here, the council commissioned aerial imaging company Blue Sky International to produce a thermal map of town to target dodgy landlords and people living under the radar. Now, every major city in Canada, too, is the same. You've got lots of immigrants every year, and if it wasn't for all the bedroom basements and various places for them to live in, there'd be a massive crisis indeed, and it's always been that way. So there's more to this than meets the eye. This is, again, to habitualize you to the use of these techniques being done on the public without their consent. And also, believe you me, it's going to take off like crazy. I'll have to look into this Blue Sky International to see who runs the operation and how many relatives he has working in Britain and elsewhere, you know, because I guarantee that's how things work, folks. Them's big bucks. Also, as we go into austerity, it says 80% of US adults face near poverty and unemployment, a survey finds. And it says that people are going to look through boxes of food during a food distribution by the food bank and so on, as they show you what happens in, for instance, New York. And food pantries, etc., introduced in 2007 in the southern tier of New York, covers nearly 4,000 predominantly rural miles. The converted beverage truck delivers fresh produce, dairy products, and other grocery items. That's a typical example of folk using charities to try to feed them, to which the government's awfully happy for. Otherwise, it'd be riots. It keeps riots from happening, you see. But it says 4 out of 5 US adults struggle with joblessness, near poverty, or reliance on welfare for at least part of their lives, a sign of deteriorating economic security and an elusive American dream. Now, I've mentioned before that the big boys, the private organization that runs the world, they call themselves a parallel government. They did set up the World Trade Organization a long time ago, and they planned to give all the factories to China, and without saying a word to Americans or Canadians or anybody else. And they did just that. They moved them all to China. It took years. It took 30 years in negotiations. And then it took about another 20 years to train up the engineers in the West, Chinese engineers, so that they could go back home and wait for the factories coming, because they had no engineers trained to run the factories back then. It's all planned. That's how careful they are in their strategies. They also knew pretty well accurately the amount of joblessness they'd have with folk losing their jobs and not when all the factories are gone. And that's also why Homeland Security is very, very important. And every country's going with the same agenda. All the countries that were dispossessed by the WTO and free trade. Because it keeps everybody in line, because they're expecting massive riots down the road, which will come when the time is right, obviously. They know exactly. It's amazing how much they know with their constant surveys. They have real-time polls done on the internet all the time. They have all your data as you chat and Twitter to each other, and they know exactly how the people are feeling at all times. They know exactly the point to push them over the edge. And they'll do it when it's the right time and start it all. But this is what's happening, as I say. This is like something you'd find in Britain as well. It's the same kind of articles you'll find in the US and elsewhere as the whitewash over what's really going on. Now, here's an article too about a whistleblower to do with GMO. And it's a Canadian federal scientist. This is an interview with a whistleblower. Doesn't happen every day, but this interviewer spoke with Dr. Terry Vrain, a former soil biologist and genetic scientist who for 35 years worked for Agriculture Canada and was a designated spokesperson to assure the public of the safety of the GMO crop. So that was his job, was to convince the public of the safety of the stuff. He retired 10 years ago and thus no longer receives a paycheck dependent on a specific perspective. With time to read different viewpoints in GMO agriculture, Dr. Vrain experienced a gradual awakening, leading him to speak out passionately about the devastating effects of GMOs, both to the environment and to the health of sentient beings. I'll put this article up tonight. It's a fairly lengthy article for those who want to read it. And he talks about the DNA alteration and all the rest of it in the plants, and how they've conned the public by saying it's just another variety. We've been altering plants for centuries, but we haven't been doing it with this technique, believe you me, by putting foreign genes into it. This is a new thing altogether. But I'll put it up tonight as well. And also, something that Canada should do, because we're all gouged here by the things they make you use now, like computers, etc., on the prices of them and all the software. The Parliament of Australia urges its citizens to bypass the geolocks on software. It says Australians are frustrated that MS, Adobe and others charge twice as much than other countries. And it's same with Canada. I mean, a laptop here costs about twice as much as the same model in the US. But as an Australian Parliamentary Committee released a report today encouraging Australian consumers to find lawful ways to bypass the geolocks on popular software from Apple, Adobe, Microsoft and others. According to ABC Australia, the report is a result of testimony given to the committee by the reps from Microsoft, Adobe and Apple, companies that do business globally and charge Australian consumers and businesses considerably more for the privilege of purchasing their products and services. On average, Aussies pay 42% more for the same stuff as Americans. Well, Canadians do too. It's pretty well the same. The three companies grilled by the Standing Committee on Infrastructure and Communications each gave differing answers on why their wares cost more in Australia. Adobe said it offered a specialized bespoke experience for Australian customers, which means nothing at all. It's just PR prattle. And Apple blamed the local copyright holders for higher prices on its local iTunes store. Microsoft said its prices were set and customers could vote with their wallets, except customers couldn't exactly do that because of geo-blocking. The terms geo-locking or geo-blocking refer to aggregating the broad set of techniques companies put in place to segregate the world into different regions or markets. Most companies that do business internationally have different pricing models for different regions of the world. Microsoft, for example, might charge customers in emerging markets less for products than it would charge customers in the US or the UK. But software pricing in Australia tends to be skewed far to the expensive side of things. Indeed, Penny Arcade report editor and Ars alum Ben Katura recently wrote about the cost of being a gamer in Australia, noting that new game releases will often cost more than $100 Australian, or about $92 US it costs more than they'll pay in the US. Anyway, there's nothing new in this. It's just that they'll gouge you as much as the public ticket. And it's to do with, again, the societies which will complain and those who won't. And Canada and Australia, again, they're all supposedly parts of the British Commonwealth, a term, again, created, by the way, by the Royal Institute for International Affairs. And Lord Alfred Milner was the guy who gave it the term, coined the term, the British Commonwealth. That's where the rich steal all the commoners' wealth. But it goes on to talk about how they're so obedient and quiet. They don't complain as much. So they get screwed. Back with more after this. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix, talking about the big system, and it's complete in total actually worldwide, as Carl Quigley said it was to be, and they're bringing it in so well because they're privatizing so many of the organizations that were agencies that were government agencies, never mind the fact you're privatizing all the institutions that you built up too, and your water supplies and everything else, and giving it to their pals for peanuts who are often international, live somewhere else, some other country, for pure profit too. So anyway, everyone knows that Britain is the flagship for the amalgamation of countries, and of course NAFTA is for the amalgamation of the Americas, all of the Americas by the way, and the Caribbean as well. But as this goes on, it gets worse and worse, and it's actually working the way it's supposed to go, as I say. Here's an example here, as they get, remember, free trade, if you look into all their articles under free trade, they'll always tell you that it's the free movement of goods and labour across all national boundaries. A very important part they tend to omit, but it's in all their articles that they've signed. But it says Brussels, this is the EU Soviet system now, this new super parliament that nobody wants, and it's not democratic. They're offering British firms in Britain, cash bribes of almost £1,000 a time to take on foreign workers. Not British workers, but foreign workers. Thousands of youngsters are also being offered payments totaling more than £1,100 to take a job in Britain under the European Commission scheme. The extraordinary initiative appears to directly undermine government efforts to persuade firms to take on British workers as the recovery takes hold. Well, they have no recovery there. In an interview with the Daily Mail yesterday, the Business Minister Matthew Hancock said firms had a duty to hire Britons rather than take an easy option of filling vacancies with well-trained foreign workers. Now, this is only one scheme they've got on the go by paying foreign workers to come in to the firms that are going to hire them. Because they have many other schemes as well to give them even more cash if they take them on. Actually, some of them will even pay for their first 6 months of work. So it's a great deal for the businesses, naturally. And it says firms taking on non-UK workers qualify for a payment from Brussels worth up to £870 for every EU citizen they employ to help pay for English lessons and other training. And many of them, by the way, have only been in Europe itself just maybe 2 or 3 years long enough to get their citizenship so they can move to Britain. And employers can recruit up to 20 foreign workers a year through the EU scheme, which is run with the cooperation of British job centres. Now, that means a business could employ 20 of the guys and get 20 grand just for employing them, you see. Jobless youngsters across Europe can qualify for a grant of £260+ pounds on top of that to travel to Britain for an interview. So taxpayers are being paid for them to travel for an interview. If they land the job, they also qualify for an £870 grant to help with the cost of moving to the country. And taxpayer funds that too. Yesterday, more than 800,000 UK jobs were being advertised through the scheme, more than half the total across Europe. So, remember what I've said before, they had to destroy all national cultures. I've read the articles here on the air, where the Assistant Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair's right-hand man, came out in the mainstream and said that they'd opened the floodgates wide to all mass immigration from the diverse countries, I mean non-European countries as well, in order to destroy the culture of Britain forever, so it could never be revitalised and come back again. That's on the cards. And that's what naturally is coming out of all of this too. And what chance do the people in Britain have to get a job when this super parliament in Brussels can overrule Britain anytime they want? And this so-called business minister Matthew Hancock saying they had a duty to hire Britons, that's not a law, that's his opinion. He won't put a law through to stop it, you see. So this is how bad it's getting. It's to happen elsewhere too. The US is getting the same thing, of course, because they belong to NAFTA. And again, this private organization, Council on Foreign Relations, are the ones who drafted up the treaties they all signed. Canada, the States, and Mexico, and some other Latin American countries are already on board with it too. Now, I've mentioned before about this so-called plotting a terrorist attack on Canada Day. The couple they arrested for that were set up, obviously, by Canadian agencies, security agencies. It's very common, this kind of thing. You understand, when you have agencies, it doesn't matter what department of government it is, they've got to start producing results. And they're sitting on and nothing's coming in, and nothing's happening. They don't say, good job, nothing's happening. No, they tell them they want to see results. So they make things happen. They set up sting operations. And I've mentioned before about the couple they got for the so-called plotting an attack on Canada Day. They got this guy who was a heroin addict who was now on methadone, which is prescribed by the government. And it puts him in the same state as heroin, actually, sometimes worse. And the guy doesn't look too, he wouldn't win any Darwin Awards, put it that way. But Mr. Moreno said it was his understanding that U.S. authorities were involved in the investigation, but didn't say which agencies may have taken part. So it was a combined sting. And it says that the police investigation into the couple accused of plotting a terrorist attack Canada may have involved the assistance of U.S. authorities and controversial Mr. Big Technique, the couple's lawyer said on Tuesday. Tom Marino, legal counsel for John Nuttall, and Amanda Corrady made the comments after the suspects briefly appeared in the court Tuesday morning. And when you scroll down on this, they keep talking about the Mr. Big Technique and how they set up sting operations and so on. And they often use it for drawing out confessions, but it says that they also do it to create the crime, the appearance of crime. They set up a criminal organization, or the appearance of a criminal organization, drawing folk into it to set up people to charge, basically. It says the Mr. Big Techniques differs from routine kinds of undercover tactics, said Corey Keenan, PhD criminology student at Simon Fraser University, who co-wrote a book on the techniques used in Canada. It says rather than infiltrate a criminal organization, the undercover officers create one. They create a criminal organization. The ultimate goal of the operation is to extract evidence that can be used to convict a suspect in a trial. They carefully weave this fake world around their target, introducing him into what they see as a legitimate organized crime gang. Mr. Keenan said, at a certain point, an investigator posing as a leader of the organization, Mr. Big attempts to elicit a confession about the crime in question. Peter Copeland, defense lawyer from Toronto, who specialized in Mr. Big cases, said the technique causes problems when the confession is extracted in an unduly coercive environment that the fictitious criminal gang puts the suspect in. I mean, they made movies about that where they set up a person, they give him a fake reality, and all their friends around him will actually act out the part of this fake reality because they're not their friends at all. They're part of this sting operation. They could drive you crazy. They can convince you of anything at all. It says in the case of a terrorist plot, it says that it was possible that the creation of a false world around the suspect would create concerns of entrapment. Well, of course it would. The guy was he's a cocaine addict, for God's sake. And he was on prescribed methadone. I mean, what do you expect? What an easy target, eh? And another article too, about the same thing. It says he's in a psychiatric hospital. So the lawyer for a man charged in connection with the plan to set off bombs at the BC Legislature Canada is casting doubt on the client's ability to stand trial. John Nuttall, 38, has been certified under the Mental Health Act and has been treated at the Forensic Psychiatric Hospital in Coquitlam. Defense lawyer Tom Marino said Friday. Nuttall and his partner, Amanda Mary Corrody, were arrested in Abbotsford on July 1st, charged with attempting to kill or maim thousands of people at the Legislature by exploding 3 bombs filled with rusty nails as part of a terrorist attack, all supplied to them by the guys in the sting. The two were arrested after a 5-month investigation by the RCMP-led Integrated National Security Enforcement Team. Now, another thing, too, apart from getting results, they've got to set up something to keep the force going, a specialized section of the force. You've got to get things happening, folks. If nothing's happening, what are you going to do? How many people, at times, especially in the US, have they found firemen actually creating fires? There's lots of them. Because then they get in there and act the brave guy, and hopefully they get promoted. When you get government agencies involved in this, they've got to get results. If nothing's happening, you've got to create the circumstances for the results. Or they're disbanded, obviously. This is happening over and over. And this guy, honestly, I mean, he was so out of his skull. I think you could convince him of anything. I think you could have told him it was a Martian invasion and you're going to fight them. He'd probably believe you. But it looks good in the books. And again, there's always people in special security and government that want promotion. Everybody's after promotion, folks. Good record promotion at any cost. It's just like private business today. Same thing. Well, from Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. And may your God or your gods go with you.